Hello and welcome to Thursday Thoughts. Thursday Thoughts? What on earth are they, I hear you ask? Well, my friend Lucy and I meet every week over on Instagram to talk all things personal growth because she is as obsessed with it as I am. And we decided that we might as well put those conversations out as a weekly podcast. So now you can listen to us chat here on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll be talking about topics such as spirituality, limiting beliefs, the ego, imposter syndrome, gratitude, meditation, confidence, and so much more. So if you're ready, here we go.
So we're talking about introversion slash extroversion. And one thing that I just wanted to say about this, because it's something that actually, particularly the introversion side of it, something I've thought about a lot, because I've realized over the last probably 5 or 10 years that I'm a proper introvert. But most people who know me probably wouldn't agree with that, because there is a huge misunderstanding when it comes to introversion and extroversion, that actually people tend to think that introverts are really quiet and sort of shy and all of those things, and they can be. But actually, my understanding of it is that when you're introverted, it means that you get your energy by being alone. And when you're extroverted, you get all of your energy from being around other people. So an introvert like myself, although I'm very outgoing when I'm around people and can be very sort of, loud and confident seeming with other people, I can only take so much of that. And then I crave coming back to myself and being on my own to replenish my energy. And I think this is the major sort of misunderstanding when it comes to particularly introversion, because that is the difference. So extroverts get their energy by being around other people. They seek out other people to replenish their energy. And for introverts, it's the opposite.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to note, because actually this morning I thought, right, I'm going to look up the definition of
Oh,
what it
did
says in the
you?
dictionary of an introvert and an extrovert, because I feel that particularly Western society almost looks upon introversion as something a little bit negative and
Yeah.
something that isn't as, it's not kind of celebrated as much as being an extrovert. And interestingly, well, I just went onto Google and I just put it into Google. So there are various definitions, but the one which really stuck out was so an extrovert was like someone is like an outgoing, socially confident person. So that's kind of like a really like, yes, you're an extrovert. And an introvert is a shy, reticent person.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of almost says it all. It's kind of like, okay, you might be shy, but that's not what an introvert actually is. That's almost kind of
No.
like saying that a reticent person. It means like you're very reserved and you're not kind of outgoing out there. But I think you can be a confident introvert. You don't have to be a shy introvert. So you're
Totally.
right. If you think, and then actually thinking back to the Latin of where the word came from, honestly, I knew my Latin was going to come in one handy one day when I learned it. But intro meaning inward, extro meaning obviously outward, but vertero, which means to turn. So it basically means to turn inwards or to turn outwards. And as you said, it's how we get our energy, how we fuel ourselves, how we resource ourselves. So if you're an introvert, you can go to a party, you can be extrovert, you can be outgoing, you can be loud, you can talk to the people, you can really have a lovely time. But then at the end of the party, how do you feel? Do you feel like you could go and do that all again and get loads of energy from it? And if you can, you're probably most likely an extrovert. Or do you feel like you need to go home and you need to just go and you need to go and resource yourself by being alone, having some quiet time? And that is how I understand it as being introverted. It's how we, as you said, it's how we energize ourselves, how
Yeah.
we fuel ourselves, and where you get your energy from. But it does. But I think also there's such a spectrum. You're not either an introvert or an extrovert. You're somewhere on that line, and you might have more kind of qualities of being an introvert or an extrovert, and vice versa. But it's so interesting, I think, how it is portrayed in society. When you think about kind of more Asian cultures, for example, Japanese, for example, it's almost like introversion's a little bit more celebrated there, being a little bit more quiet, a little bit more humility, a little bit more introspective. That's kind of more of a way of being. So it's weird how, we, how it is portrayed, and there is no right. It's not. There's no right or wrong way. But it's. I think it's good to have an awareness of where you land on that scale, because if you don't know, and I think for many years I personally didn't have any awareness about it, because I think I was trying to be an extrovert and thought there was actually something wrong with me, because I was always incredibly shy, but actually that shyness was a bit more like I just needed some time to myself, and I just needed to sort of retreat a little bit, but often
Yeah.
never give myself opportunity to do so.
Totally. No, it's so interesting, this conversation. I love it. And it's something I've talked a lot about on my podcast, because obviously my podcast is for single child-free women. And actually, many of us, as it turns out, as I've discovered through the podcast, many of us single gals, we're introverts. But I love what you said there about the Latin, and that it means to turn inwards or to turn outwards, because again, that to me is much more what it means, because and actually, like again, like you said, we're all on a spectrum somewhere, between, most people aren't one extreme or the other. And I'm a really good example of that, because I describe myself as an extroverted introvert, which means that when I am, with people, I'm definitely not shy. I'm not quiet. I'm not sort of, I'm pretty confident in social situations, but I absolutely have to have that alone time, probably more than most people I know. And one thing I wanted to say is that I think that it is, I was quite confused about this for a long time, because for many years back in my 20s, I didn't realize that was what was going on with me, because for a while, I felt like there was something wrong with me when I didn't always want to be out partying, and I wanted to kind of retreat back into myself. And I remember I lived with she's still one of my best friends on the planet, one of my oldest, bestest friends. Lived with her and her boyfriend at the time, who's now her husband and father of her kids, was always around a lot. And the two of them are hugely sociable, and they're big extroverts. Both of them are extroverts. And I remember there were so many times where I would come back from work and there'd kind of be people around at our flats. And, they'd all be sort of socializing very regularly. And I would just have to take myself into another room, and just because I just wanted to be alone. And at the time, for quite a long time, I thought there was something wrong with me. That I thought, am I some kind of weird, I don't know, is there something weird about me? Am I like just a real loner, or all of these things? And essentially, I thought there was something wrong with me until I understood and learned that actually all it was is that I'm an introvert. So I think it's, maybe there are some people out there, some people who are watching this or listening to this, who might have had that same experience that I did. Because it's nice to know that there is nothing wrong with you. And also, going back to what you were saying about how society sort of sees introverts versus extroverts, there definitely is that sort of, it's, people tend to think that it's quote unquote better to be an extrovert because that means this or that or the other. And I would totally disagree with that. Apart from anything else, there are many benefits, I think, to be more of an introverted person, and more of somebody who does tend to look inwards than outwards. Because aside from anything else, and this is something you and I've talked about a lot, and something I've certainly talked about many times on my podcast, is that we all need to be able to look inwards, really. We all should be going inwards, certainly some of the time, because that is hugely important, because we need to be able to find our happy within ourselves, not always from external sources and external, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. But actually, Polly, one thing that I wanted to ask you is, because you and I had sort of touched on this topic a couple of weeks ago, and I said that my idea of a nightmare would be to kind of go to like a week-long wedding and be stuck in a big like villa with a load of people. That to me would be a nightmare. And it's not that I don't love being around people. It's not that I don't like having a good time with people. And actually, going off on a tangent, when people describe what is a good time. I think this is something that can be really difficult when you are introverted, because there's that sort of assumption that having a good time has to involve lots of people and partying and alcohol and being really sort of out there with loads of people. And it's just simply not the case. You can have a good time being at home by yourself reading your book. And I think both of those things are valid. But anyway, if I had to go to, like, let's take, for example, a hen do. A hen do is my idea of absolute hell. Going away, going to wherever it may be for 3 or 4 days with a group of people who you're just stuck with for 4 days without being able to get away from it. That for me, I'd find really, really difficult, because I need that time alone. And again, doesn't mean that I don't enjoy the time with people, but it just means that I really have this need to be by myself to replenish my energy. And one thing that I know that you also think of yourself as an extrovert. And when we had this conversation about it a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned that you love parties. And I know that you are, I know, for example, when you had your 50th and you had a whole weekend away with friends, and you love that kind of thing. So you and I are obviously, although we're both introverts, we sit somewhere quite differently on that spectrum. So what would you say to that? Because I know how you love your party time and weekends away and things like that.
Yeah, and I love going to festivals for weekends and being around people, and I love dressing up. I love dressing up. I love fancy dress, and I love all of that, and which always slightly surprises me. I really do. I love, and I can be quite out there when I'm in big groups of people, and I love that, the energy that it gives me, and that's just who I am, and I've always been like that. But I then I can do a few days, and then when I've had enough, then I need to retreat. So that's kind of, I've worked out, is my limit. I know where my limit is, and then literally probably 2-3 days, and then I need to go and retreat. And then I'm very happy not to talk to anybody for about a week. It's literally like I have to then go and properly refuel, resource myself. And I'm very happy with my own company. And I love my own company, and I need to have that peace and quiet. So I go to both extremes, but I know when I've been in that sort of environment where it's been really busy, full on, I'm surrounded by people a lot of the time, I absolutely know there is always a limit where I'm like, enough now, it's time to go. I'm done. So it's just, I think we all have different sort of levels of it. It's almost like your level of your zone of tolerance. How much can you bring in? And I do get fueled, and I must, it does fuel me going to big music concerts, and I love, that energy and that, the energy of all the people. That totally does resource me. But I think it's only to a certain sort of level, and then yes, my system goes, right, too much stimulation, time to go inwards. And then equally, I'm very, very happy on my own for long periods of time. But I don't know about you, but I then have times where, if I've been on my own, if I've been not doing, very quiet for a period of time, I do also then get that feeling of like, right, I want to go out. I want to go out and see someone. Like on Friday night, actually, I went, it's Brighton Festival here at the moment, it's brilliant. And we went and met some friends on the beach, and then I ended up going into the festival with some friends, loads of people around. It was so much fun. I absolutely loved it. And I was kind of looking for it. I was craving it. I felt like I needed it to kind of fuel me. And then I came home and had, it was great. But then on Saturday, I had a very quiet day, and it was really nice. So it's that yin and yang. And ultimately, though, I would always describe myself as an introvert rather than an extrovert. I really would say that that's my overriding default setting. But I do like to have these little moments and pockets of kind of that kind of feeling of like, yes, I want to go out, and so that's the thing. I obviously sit somewhere differently on that spectrum than you do, and that's all good. But I think the trick here is to know yourself, and to accept where you are, and to understand why it is that sometimes you need to be a bit quieter, or why you're craving some external forces. There's a really good book, I don't know if you've read it, by someone called Suzanne Cain, called Quiet.
Do you know what? I've got it. I've had it for years, and I've never read it. And I need to read it, and I will read it. It's so stupid. It's been on my bookshelf for ages. So
Yeah,
yes.
well, in that book, she very much says it's about, again, it's about, there's no right or wrong. There's a spectrum, and it is whether you get your energy from turning inwards or you get your energy from turning outwards. And interestingly, in that book, she says, I mean, the split between extroverts and introverts, you know, in terms of the dominant one that you lean toward, is pretty much equal.
Is that right?
It's pretty much equal. So in the fact that we celebrate extroverts more is, you know, it's probably because, you know, if you're on stage or if you're performing, or, you know, you're deemed probably as an extrovert. But I bet there's a lot of performers out there who are actually introverts.
I was going to say that, but that's the irony. That's the irony. I mean, I bet you a lot of comedians, I don't know why I go straight to comedians, because I think comedians are sort of have this reputation of being quite introverted and being quite shy and being quite insecure and all of these things. And it's often the case with performers that people feel comfortable on stage, but that doesn't mean that they're extroverted in terms of their personality. One thing I want to pick up on that you said, which is so interesting and shows the difference between you and I, you said that you get to a point where you start sort of seeking out company, and you sort of like itching for that. You start itching for that kind of socializing, and all the rest of it. And I never have that. I have to do the opposite. I have to make myself do things because I'm so happy in my own company that if I and actually lockdown's a really good example of that, because I was on my own in my flat throughout the whole of lockdown, and when everyone was like going, oh, the poor single people living alone, I was kind of like feeling all smug, thinking, well, thank God I'm not homeschooling. I mean, Jesus. And it was really interesting because, although one thing I will say is that my flat, not where I'm living at the moment, but my flat in London, as you know, is in a huge big house, and so there's like 11 flats in this massive, great, giant building. And so I do have people around me. And so I did see my neighbours, you know, regularly, because like the house is sort of on its own kind of plot sort of thing. But that aside, I was literally on my own, living on my own in my flat for the whole of lockdown, and not once did I feel, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that, not once did I feel like lonely or, oh my God, I really crave this or I crave that. And it was just really, really interesting. But
Yeah.
yes, going back to what you were saying about, you sort of get that kind of itch of like, I've got to get out and sort of socialize. And I'm like, I get the feeling of, shit, I really should.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't, because of course I see my friends and I love seeing friends and my family and all the rest of it, but it has to be in small doses, and I don't require it. Like I can go for a long time without needing to see people. And also I think, you know, when you're introverted, you can, like, I never feel isolating, considering I'm single and child free as well. Like I never, ever, ever feel isolated. But I think you can be introverted and you can spend a lot of time on your own, but that doesn't mean that you're not connected, because I always feel very, very connected to many people in my sort of day-to-day life. I'm constantly in touch with people, even if I'm not physically with people every day. So I think it's interesting. It is interesting, isn't it? It's a fascinating subject. I love it.
One thing I was going to say, which I think a lot of introverts, a quality of a lot of introverts have, is this ability to, well, is also being an empath. And I don't know if you would agree with this, in that, and that's kind of almost why we need to go inward. Because because I would describe myself as a big empath. I feel other people's feelings. I can be in a room and I can pick up on other people's feelings and emotions, and I literally can sort of take them on. I've had to really work at not taking on everybody's feelings and emotions. And I can read that very easily. And I think sometimes because of that, it can actually feel very overwhelming to be in big groups of people when you're taking on lots of different people's emotions and feelings, and you're feeling it all. And so that's why sometimes you've got to go in and get away and retreat and sort of, you know, build yourself up again. Whereas I think if you're an extrovert, you probably don't. I imagine that you don't feel it as much because it can be. Oh,
Oh my God,
balloon.
those balloons!
Because it can be quite draining when you're taking on lots of people's energy.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if that rings bells with you because that's when I feel like I get completely exhausted. It's because I can feel it all, and I just
Yeah.
need to go in and just go and have some time to myself.
A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you.
I can relate to that 100% because, like you, I'm also a big empath, and I very much am one of those people who can tune into. It's very, very natural and automatic for me to be able to tune into how people are feeling. Very much so. In fact, so much so that it wasn't something I ever put words to until relatively recently, because it was just second nature to me to be able to just see and just intuitively understand how people are feeling. And yeah, I agree that it can be that you take on the feelings of other people. I mean, I even get it when I might be walking down the road and I'll see like a little old man walking past who just looks really sad, and I just feel that it can literally bring tears to my eyes when I see someone in pain. And I've noticed actually over the years how, thinking about people who are sort of less fortunate than us, when you see somebody who is, I don't know whether it's somebody who has a major disability or whatever it might be, there are certainly some people who that doesn't necessarily, and it doesn't mean that they don't care. It doesn't mean that they don't empathize or whatever. But I think when you are sort of quite extreme on the empathy scale, you do take on those kinds of things quite a lot. I find that's my experience anyway.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I absolutely know. So I think that those,
if you're very upsetting,
if you're an empath, you are probably much more likely to be introverted because actually it can just be too overwhelming otherwise to constantly be around people and taking it all on. But then I suppose an extrovert could probably be it's a really interesting one. I'd love to know. But an extrovert probably can be an empath, but actually that is what fuels them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's just something I thought I would noticed.
Can you think of any major extroverts in your life off the top of your head? I'm trying to think of extroverts in my life.
Oh, I mean, I've got friends, and they're not necessarily always, really loud or really bold. But I have friends who really love always to be around people and really need people in their lives and would rather be with people all the time and can go and do things again, a lot in big groups. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know that. Yes, there's a lot of those sorts of people, and that's the thing. I think we always think an extrovert is really gregarious and really outspoken, but actually, again, I think that's all complete bollocks. I think you can be an extrovert and just still be a really, relatively unbold person.
Completely.
And again, often confidence is kind of labelled extroverts or unconfident introverts, and again, I think it's all wrong.
Not the case.
It's just a different way of being.
Yeah, it's so true. It makes me think of one of my ex-boyfriends, the loveliest guy in the world. I'm still in touch with him. I still absolutely love him to pieces. And when we lived together in West London, and as I say, he is truly is the loveliest guy on the planet, but he's a total extrovert, whereas I'm not. And it caused issues in our relationship because I'm the kind of person who I'm not one of these people who welcomes random visitors to my flat at any time. Like, that's just not the way I operate. Like, it's just not. anyone that comes around to mine, it will be because it's been organized. Like it's just not something, it's just not the way that I live. Whereas I know that there are plenty of people out there who are kind of, have like an open house and people just drop round and and that's great. That's, each to their own. And my ex-boyfriend was very much like that. And when we lived together, I found it really difficult because, especially at weekends, where I would tend to just want lots of kind of chilled, quiet, and chilled quiet time does not mean sitting around doing fuck all watching TV. I never do that. That's not what it's about. But what I need is, just that time alone, or with my boyfriend, as it was at the time. And I found it really hard because he would be like, oh yeah, so-and-so coming around for lunch, or so-and-so coming around for a drink. And I'd be like, oh my God, this is like my idea of an absolute nightmare. So I think it can be really difficult if you've got a couple where one is an extrovert and one is an introvert. And I know that from my own personal experience. I don't know about you, Polly. How are you and Giles both introverts?
Yeah.
Or what would you say to that?
We're so similar on this. We're so similar. So he's like me. We both like to go out. We both like to have fun. But his threshold is probably very similar to my threshold. We both know when we're done, and we're kind of. He's probably slightly more introverted than me. But he's very happy with his own company. He's happiest when he's out walking the dog on his own. So yes, we're very similar in that sense. So it works, which is great. It works really well because I could totally see if he was completely extroverted, it could be quite exhausting. It could be really exhausting. But then yin and yang, often opposites, and it can work. But for me, it works perfectly because we're so similar. So
yeah. One thing I want to just pick up on again before we think about wrapping up, because it's already 27 minutes past. It's gone so quickly. Is you said again you love going out and having fun, and I just want to pick up on that again because I can't remember whether I've done a podcast on this, the concept of what it means to have fun, because I do think this is quite important for people who don't necessarily find their fun in a big party or a weekend away or a festival or whatever it is. Your version or anyone's version of fun we get to define for ourselves what we think fun is. And to me, fun is getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and being the only person out who, watching the sunrise by the river or by the sea. That to me is fun. And fun could be spending an entire Sunday afternoon working on something that I'm, working on the podcast. Again, that for me is fun. Also, spending time with people. I mean, I'm obsessed with music, as you know, and going to gigs is one of my favorite things in the world. But speaking of gigs, I love nothing more than going to a gig, but I like going to a gig rather than a festival. Do you know what I mean? But I just wanted to sort of point out the fact that it is, we do get to define what fun looks like for us. And I think there can be such pressure on people who, if you don't want to stay till 3 o'clock in the morning and get absolutely shit-faced, it's like, oh my God, I've had so many people say to me, oh my God, you're so boring, you want to go home. And I'm like, what, do you know what? And now these days I'll be like, it's totally fine. If you want to think I'm boring, that's totally fine by me, but I'm going to go home anyway, get an early night and be up early tomorrow morning so that I don't waste my entire day with a hangover. That's just me. And if some people think that's boring, fine, I'm over it. But I just think that's something that's worth mentioning,
Yeah. And again, it's that outward pressure, isn't it, of people thinking that is fine. You're right. Everybody has their own definition of it, and we just all need to respect that actually you're not. And I think that the difficulty is when you can do both, and there's the expectation is, because I get that quite a bit as well. The expectation is like, oh no, you can't possibly go home early. But actually, I'm very good now at just staying. I'm not so good when I'm out because I actually like to. It's normally Giles actually will be saying, "Polly, come on, go home." But actually, I'm very good at just not going. I would rather just not go out. I'd rather just stay at home if I'm feeling like I need to hunker down. So it's just finding your own tools and your own ways of managing your feelings and not getting overwhelmed and not getting drained, because the problem is if we don't listen, as being as an introvert, if you don't listen to those signals and you just keep on going, that is when you're going to end out depleted, de-energized, completely burnt out, and that's no fun. So you have to just really listen to yourself and just get to know yourself and what does energize you. And I think, in this day and age, being busy, is just so normal and normalized, and stress is so normal and normalized, and we all just get used to it, that actually it's rubbish. You've really got to just take this time. Everyone's so bored of hearing it, but you really do need to fill your cup up. And knowing how you resource yourself and how you energize yourself is such a major part of that. So yes. Because it might be, because actually if you were an extrovert, you might actually say, well, I don't want to just go and do nothing. Actually, I need to go and get my energy from a load of people, which is great. So actually there's no one rule fits all. So there we go.
Precisely. I think that is the perfect point to end, and we're 1 minute over. My God.
All right.
No,
really good to talk to you.
You too, love.
And really good subject. This, I like this.
I love it. It's fascinating. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Lots of love.
You too. Take care.
Bye, babe. Take care. Bye. Bye.